Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged podcast. Really excited to bring you a guest this week from Australia, a wonderful man called Simon Holmes of Court. Now, I met Simon a couple of years ago and we just clearly got on really well, and it was amazing to meet him. It was a real privilege, and he's an amazing man. I've been meaning to get him on the podcast for a long time. It's taken a bit of time to organise, my fault. And what Simon's done in the last 10, 15 years is really make a big impact on the energy scene in Australia. The way I first heard of him was he set up was part of the group that set up a community wind farm in rural Victoria in Australia, which has been a huge success. So it was a couple of big wind turbines that are just outside a small township. The people in the town have benefited directly economically from that wind farm. They're very keen on it. It's a very popular renewable energy installation, and sort of gives a hint at the way that we should be doing, particularly land-based wind. When it's owned by the people that live near it, it makes a big difference. So that's where I first heard of him. Since then, he's been doing many, many other things. He's a really big advocate for renewable energy in Australia. He's a fairly vocal critic of the coal industry and the federal government's attitudes to renewables and particularly electric cars, which is fairly negative. But he's just a really calm, clear, good voice advocating for an energy transition, which Australia could do with enormous success, could become a global leader in that field. They have such an enormous abundance of natural resources, which would really make a big difference. Before we start, let's just have a quick word from our wonderful sponsors, without whom we could not make this glorious podcast. My Energy is putting the I back into British innovation. My Energy is putting the I back into inventing the future. My Energy is putting the I back into inspiring a nation. Recharging the world with green, smart energy. Charge your EV with your PV and more. Visit myenergy.com and help to spark the green revolution. My Energy, driving the charge to a greener future. So I don't know if you remember, we met at WOMAD in Adelaide a few years ago, with Simon as well,
yeah,
which was great, and I've been meaning to do this for ever since then, so about 3 years.
Oh, that's great!
Sorry, it's taken me so long.
When was that? Was that 2018? It was, yeah.
Or 20? It would have been I think like early 2019, summer 2019.
Oh yeah, it was 2019, and then 2020. It was pandemic. Yes. Yeah, well, I couldn't make it, but my family went to WOMAD last year, and it was the very last event before lockdown happened.
Days after. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh well, we're coming out of it now very slowly. Simon, thank you for taking time though to come and talk to us on Fully Charged, because I'm a big fan of your. I think it's your approach as well, as much as what you've been doing. But so the first time I heard about you and what you were doing was the community wind farm, which I'm going to remember the name, the Hepburn Wind Farm.
Hepburn Wind. Yeah,
Hepburn Wind. So when did that set up? What year was that?
Yeah, well, it's been running 10 years this month.
Wow.
I think it's the 21st or 22nd is our 10th anniversary of generation. But it started about 6 years before then. It took a while to get going. It started off actually. There was a developer who wanted to build a wind farm in our area and had a town hall meeting. A few folks who subsequently I got to know very well, but went along to that meeting really excited. There was going to be, at that stage, 2004 or 5, there were very few wind farms in Australia.
Yeah.
They were very excited to hear about it. But when they walked into the town hall to hear about it, it was almost like a lynching atmosphere.
Wow.
The developer was run out of town, told that the turbines weren't welcome in any, they were told in no uncertain terms. And
Wow.
and these folks, one of them, I guess the sort of the guy who was really the passionate, the driver in the early days was a Danish national who built sustainable houses. Didn't know anything about renewable energy, just that wind turbines were very popular when he grew up, and everyone seemed to have a stake in one in Denmark. So he thought it was crazy that we would object, and he set about to try to turn that around.
And that caused a bit of trouble.
I met him on the main street of Daylesford, where our farm is, and he had a card table set up. On one side, he had a wind atlas showing we lived in one of the windiest areas of Australia, and then he had a diagram showing how a community wind farm would work. He would build the turbines, sell the energy. The energy would go back to the members, and a certain amount would go back to the community. And then he had a sign-up sheet, and so I signed up. I think I was about 200th member, and when we hit 500 members for it, we had a formation meeting to say let's build this thing. And I went into the meeting and came out as the chair accidentally.
Right.
Yeah. As these things happen.
Yes.
But took us quite a while to put it together. We had to raise $10 million.
Wow, I see. So because when you think of it, I'm sort of thinking, a 10 kilowatt wind turbine, not that big, but you're talking big proper stuff.
Yeah. In fact, I was looking for. We have a farm off grid, and in summer solar's fine. In winter, you can get a week, as we're in right now, where there's hardly any sun, and we'd have to run the diesel generator. I wanted to get one of those little 10 kilowatt turbines, and he said, "Why are you bothering with that when we could buy? We could get these megawatt scale turbines that could power the town." So 2 turbines sitting on a hill, and they put as much power into the grid as the 2,000 homes in the area pull out of the grid every year. So we effectively sort of net zero on the electricity in the town back in 2011.
Right. Wow, that is really impressive. And then, so how do the kind of local residents then benefit from it? I mean, obviously, if you've invested in, is that what was happening with the kind of the group of people who originally joined up?
Yeah, there are just over 2,000 members. The majority are local, so there's the dividend flows that go back that way. But there's we provided a bundle of free shares to those who live immediately around, within a 2-kilometre radius.
Right.
But one of the biggest things is the community fund. So every year the wind farm gives a significant amount of money to a community fund. Initially, we were focusing anything that was needed in the community, like we helped the local men's shed with some tools, and we helped them build new park benches for the town cemetery. We funded a vegetable garden at the primary school. We put solar on lots of community buildings, and we put an EV charger in the main street of town, and it was fun to have that powered. We provide the power for that EV charger in town, so you can sit and you can plug your car in and walk 10 steps and see the turbines on the next hill.
Right. Oh, God, that's fantastic. Because, I mean, just give me, and our listeners as well, because I've heard of both places, but I can't place them geographically. Roughly how far from Melbourne? So it's in Victoria.
Yeah. So Daylesford is, I'd say it's an hour and a half to the northwest of Melbourne.
Right.
So it's just over the Great Divide. It's up at about 650 metres, so it's pretty cold this time of year. We get snow a few times each winter. It doesn't hang around for long, but it's cold. But great winds, and they're so I was 8 years involved in the project. I've stepped aside and let others come forward. But they're in the process of putting together a solar farm at the same site. Turns out it's not the best sun, but solar panels are so cheap now that if you've got a grid connection, it makes sense. Increasingly in Australia, we're seeing wind farms add some solar as well.
Right, because I mean that is the contradiction of all that, because that is just the perfect way of introducing a renewable energy source to a community. It makes so much sense. It's so much better than a big outside organisation
Yeah.
coming in and doing.
And, it made all the difference. I think in that there was a lot of concern in the early days of wind farming in Australia, and it wasn't helped by the sort of carpetbagger mentality of people going around and signing up neighbours and then going to the next neighbour and offering them different amounts of money and not being aware of the complex relationships that are in regional areas. So there was a lot of bad blood through some either clumsy or even bad behaviour by developers early on. That created an environment of distrust. And in a way, we kind of inoculated our community from that anti-wind movement. So many people in our town have been in. We had a picnic when the first components of the turbine came and the crane was on site lifting the tower. We had a picnic. 300 people turned up. We had a coffee machine and a band, and we sat on the hill for a day and we watched it go from foundations to the nacelle sitting on top. And a few days later, the blades lifted up. So the community's been very engaged with the wind farm all the way along, and familiarity actually breeds acceptance.
Yes, yeah. No, I mean, they're so good. But also, I mean, I think the perception that we often get, because what we'll hear is, international news over here in the UK, we'll hear a lot of stuff about Scott Morrison or the other guy is Angus Taylor, who I want you to tell me, because I'm not exactly sure who. So Scott Morrison, we're very aware of. And some of his attitudes towards sort of just human life. It's not even necessarily any specific technology, but it's
if you care about clean energy or electric vehicles or having a habitable planet, then you won't have a lot in common with Scott Morrison. Or Angus Taylor, his energy minister.
That's who he is. Thank you.
Angus Taylor. Very cynically, his title is Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, but at every juncture, he's taken a choice to halt or slow down emissions reductions, and made some crazy decisions. Like I think it was this time last year, he paid for the feasibility study to build a new coal power station in Queensland.
Wow!
Just a few weeks ago, he allocated $600 million for the government to build a new gas power station that the energy market body, AEMO, the energy market operator, found that we don't even need. Angus Taylor consistently makes decisions that slow down the energy transition. Very frustrating for all those who care about these issues.
Yeah, and I mean, I think because I used to get sort of anxious and depressed, with politicians in this country being very anti-renewables or pro, petrol cars.
That seems to have faded away, right?
It's faded away here big time. But I mean, the thing is that now I understand it doesn't really. No, even the recent American president, they can gas on all they want about beautiful clean coal and all that stuff. It doesn't make any economic sense. I mean, more coal plants closed down under the Trump administration than had in the previous 10 years. It doesn't make. It's too expensive. It's stupid.
There has been a shift in Australia. I tell you, one of the shifts in Australia is, say, a decade ago, anything the energy minister would say about renewables, if to misparaphrase others, the energy minister would sneeze and the renewable industry would catch a cold.
Right.
Now it's fascinating. Now that we've passed the point where the economics have tipped, the economics for renewables in Australia tipped probably around 2016, where it was just any new generation was cheaper to build renewables. From that point onwards, the energy minister has become largely irrelevant. I know people in the industry who have been offered meetings to meet with the minister, and they turn them down. They're just not interested.
They're too busy doing something useful.
Too busy, moving the dial. So we could do so much more if we had a government that was wanting the transition or even pushing the transition. But we're actually the transition's moving pretty quickly in Australia, despite that. And I think I shouldn't neglect to say the states have stepped into the void. So because he's been so bad at his job, each of the states have stepped forward. So Scott Morrison and Angus Taylor still can't commit us to net zero by 2050. even though almost every one of our trading partners and all of the G7, everyone is signed on to net zero by 2050. China 10 years behind that, but every state and territory in Australia has more than a year ago signed on to that target.
Right.
So it's kind of funny that we have a federal government that's doing nothing, but the states have really stepped up.
Because I've been aware of South Australia because of Simon Hackett, and his understanding of what's going on there, and even just visiting his house when I see the kind of staggering levels of solar and batteries he's got there, which is, I think probably a bit exceptional, but it's so common. And that was the thing I remember when the very first time I flew into Sydney. My abiding memory is all these red roofs, because you really, when you fly into Sydney, you're kind of going just over people's houses. But, you just remember all these red roofs. Well, you go over that, you fly in now. The last time I did it was 2018, I think. And it's all solar panels. Just every house has solar panels. It's just normal. It's not a big deal.
I think we're well above 25% now with solar. And 10 years ago, people were putting in 1.5 kilowatt systems.
Right.
It's now extremely common for people to put in. I think the smallest that most people are putting in these days are 6.6.
Right.
And the average is around about 8 at the moment. Wow. So people are putting in big systems.
Yeah.
We I haven't looked at numbers for this year, but last year we were the largest home battery market in the world. So solar per capita, but battery in absolute terms, people just love them in Australia. The batteries don't make much economic sense, but not yet. They will when the price comes down. But with rooftop solar in Australia, if you own a north facing roof, you're mad. You're mad not to have. You're throwing money away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also from what I understand, particularly having spent most of the time I've been in Australia and Queensland, where in the summer, where it's quite warm. By Northern European standards, that's quite a warm place.
And it's a fantastic feeling on a really hot day when you've got the air conditioner just cranked up to maximum.
Yeah.
To also have the panels producing maximum power. So it's they're very complementary, our loads. We don't have anywhere near as high loads in winter as you probably do up there. Actually, a couple of fun stats on solar is that Australia only passed the UK in solar in 2019. You guys had more solar in the UK than Australia up until then.
Wow. Yeah, I am staggered by that. Wow.
And the other thing is that if you put your panels on the south side of the house, right, to point in the equator to maximise, and we put them on the north side of the house to maximise. If we put our panels on the south side, on the wrong side of the house, they still perform better than panels in Germany.
So unfair.
And so it's amazing. My electrician has gone and put solar panels on all 4 aspects of his roof. Panels are so cheap now that why not have them
you might as well stick them everywhere.
Cheaper than buying grid power. So there's a long way to go in solar on rooftops in Australia, even though we're at 25% of residences.
Yes. I mean, the first thing I just want to say is that I did speak to someone who had not only the same number of panels as I have here, so 16 panels. They were exactly the same make. They had exactly the same inverter, and he showed me his daytime graph. Now he's in northern New South Wales, and he showed me his daytime graph, and it's a completely unshaded roof, north-facing roof, and his graph is like. It's just so unfair because mine is this lovely gentle curve, like now it's going up now early in the morning. Then it goes, look at that. It goes right, then it goes down. His is like a block. It's off, on, full all day, off. All day. And he is about 20 to 25 kilowatt hours more in a day than I get, which is staggering. It's just like, just not for, and that's exactly the same system. It really is very comparable.
That's amazing.
That is incredible.
So actually, renewable transition is going really well in Australia. We could always do faster, and we need to do faster if we want to respect the science. But given that we have a federal government that treats the sector with such disdain, it's still amazing. But we've built as much renewables in the last 3 years in Australia as we did in the 30 years before then.
Right. So it is ramping up really noticeably. Yeah.
It's ramping up very nicely. Now, there's always hazards in the hazards in the distance we can
Yeah.
see heading towards us. The network operator is finding it more and more. I guess they're being more and more cautious. So it's more and more challenging when they add big facilities, and where it might have used to take 3 months to get a project connected. Some of them are taking a year for them to get online, and it's frustrating developers. But we are at the cutting edge for the amount of renewables that we're putting into our grid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the project that I've become very aware of, which I think Simon is very involved in a minor way from an investment point of view, is the I think it's called it's the massive
the Sun
solar
Cable
farm
project. Yeah.
which is so huge.
I think is it a 20 gigawatt
20 or
solar farm?
it may even be more, 26 gigawatts. Wait a minute,
So
which one? Because there's two.
There's two. There's the Asian Renewable Energy Hub, which is 26.
That is 26
gigawatts of wind and solar.
Yeah,
and then Sun Cable's.
That's right. They're a 20 gigawatts.
Pacific Power Link. And that's if the Asia Pacific. The Asian Renewable Energy Hub project, if built today, would be the largest power station of any type on the planet.
On the planet, yeah.
On the planet, it's phenomenal, and it's a really nice. That's great in that there's no storage intended for that big project, because they get very consistent sun during the day, and the wind mainly blows more at night on that project. So they're going to have a really nice balance of wind and solar, and they're going to put that into electrolyzers to create ammonia. Whereas the Asia Pacific Power Link project is the high voltage DC undersea cable that goes all the way to Singapore.
But I mean, it's such a fascinating change in the fact that, for certainly your and my lifetime, the big export from Australia has been coal and minerals. I mean, and sort of iron ore and all the rest of it. But in terms of energy, it's been coal coming out of Australia that then gets burnt in China, India, where I don't know, all over the place to generate electricity. And now you could export the electricity. It's just it's an incredible analogy of how that could be done.
It's a huge opportunity for it. There was a famous book in Australia, and it's still a phrase you hear a lot. Australia, the lucky country.
Yeah.
We were really lucky to find phenomenal amounts of gold in the 19th century. We had a very commanding global control of the wool market in the 19th and early 20th century. We've had a significant part of the wheat market. We've just stumbled from one amazing resource to the next, and then iron ore and coal and gas. Lithium. I mean, I'm sure you've covered this before. About half the world's lithium is currently mined in Australia. And increasing amount of rare earths or battery ingredients
materials
are coming from Australia.
But that is something that the general public aren't aware of. When I've been at conferences and on panels, and people have said, well, what about all the lithium that we get from Chile? And I go, well, yeah, we do get some of it from Chile. Most of it's from Australia. And the room always goes silent. They go, what? Australia?
Really? No.
They know, because all the publicity has been about Chile and Argentina and the salt flats and that extraction.
So we've got all the materials for that are needed in the energy transition, and then we've got some of our national poetry goes on about our boundless. Our national anthem goes on about our boundless plains, and it's a sunburnt country. These boundless plains are, they're sun drenched, they're windswept. A phenomenal amount of space out there with some of the world's best resources, and we're going to capture a significant amount of that. Well, actually, it's going to be 0.001%, but that's going to be a significant amount of world energy is going to be captured in Australia and turned either exported in as electrons or as products, whether it's feedstock like ammonia or more transformed goods like aluminium, and hopefully we start adding more value in Australia. Maybe we should be making batteries rather than just sending the lithium overseas.
It does sort of make sense that, wait a minute, we've got, I'm sure you haven't got all the materials needed for batteries in Australia. Maybe you do. But it does make sense for a huge amount of them. You could build a factory near where you extract them. you cut down your train. You could have that factory renewably powered as easy as poo. That's like not a...
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of industries that are energy intensive that will move operations to Australia as we get better and better at capturing these renewable resources.
Yeah.
So maybe the world's polysilicon should be made in Australia, or much of the world's aluminium can be made here as we get better and better at capturing these resources.
Yeah. I had a question, which of course is gone now. Oh yeah, no. Here's one of the things that this is something I just read very recently, which was that South Australia, which I'd heard, and I think Simon may have mentioned it. There was an hour where the whole of South Australia was only renewably powered. It was but it was the first time it happened. Like a whole state, 1.6 million people, 100% of it was wind and solar that day. But it's already 60% on average now, which is extraordinary. Because there are days when we are at 60% in the UK, but that is very rare. There are moments in a similar way. There's an hour here, an hour there, but averaging 60% is amazing. But they're planning,
and they don't have any hydro. None to speak of in South Australia. So this is wind and solar. There's a lot of new development too that's coming online. And a new interconnector between South Australia and New South Wales, which will help them get more power out. So I think we'll start. They'll go past 100%.
Well, that's because I love the fact that their 2050 target is to be 500% renewably powered, which means they're a power station that's supplying the rest of Australia in some way.
What's interesting is it's a Conservative government in South Australia.
Yes.
I mean a lot of the foundations were set by Labor government, but that vision has been taken forward with a whole lot of enthusiasm by the Conservative government, and we're finding Conservative governments all around Australia have jettisoned their reticence and are seeing the economic potential here.
Yeah. I mean,
we just need to fix the federal.
Yes. I mean, because I'm always my toes are always slightly curling when I have to acknowledge that our current administration in the UK, I've got plenty of reasons to be critical of them, but I have to acknowledge that in particularly two areas, so electrification of ground transport and offshore wind, their commitment is unquestionable. It's not a bit of greenwash or a casual policy statement. It's actual government policy to push that, and the results we are seeing results of that. I mean, it is true.
And your government has put some pressure and had some influence on a number of federal Conservatives,
right?
And that's good to see. And when Boris had his ambition seminar or ambition meeting, it was at the end of last year. There was one, I think, where Australia wasn't invited, and that was that was a big snub. That was a big snub, but you only get invited if you've got something to say, and Australia had nothing to say.
Wow, that's quite. It's sort of nasty, isn't it? It's like a bully at the school. It's kind of really
exactly. You're not invited.
But then one of the other stories I found. So I mean, because that's my experience of Australian political life is extremely limited. But I've spent quite a lot of time there. But quite a lot of time in Australia, in Queensland. So when I first went, I've now forgotten his name, but the really comically reactionary old premier of Queensland who.
Joe Bjelke-Petersen.
Joe Bjelke-Petersen. So his legacy was still around. I mean, he wasn't in power then, but
casts a very long shadow.
Yeah, you could sense it. And the fact that when I think the first Christmas I spent in Queensland, I discovered, because one of Judy's relatives was a retired Queensland cop who wasn't in prison, but as it was explained quite openly, all the people he worked with were, not like one or two, all of them. It's really phenomenal levels of corruption. And I spent hours sitting in a swimming pool with him on Christmas Day because he was a large gentleman, with him telling me amazing Queensland cop stories. And the rest of the family was so pleased because they got, he's down in the pool with the English boy. Leave him. So they had a bit of peace and quiet on Christmas Day. But that aside, I understand the kind of generally there is a little bit of, as we might understand it, Midwest US redneck policies in Queensland. I mean, there are some similarities. You hear certain phraseology and attitudes that come out. I mean, there's a lot of lovely people. Most people in Queensland are lovely, I've met. But I have occasionally heard some really caustic racism and ignorant stupidity and bigotry,
Yeah,
but
I'll get in trouble with that if I say much. But there are many good people.
There are many,
but some of the more destructive. I mean, basically, it's the Queensland. It's called there. It's the Liberal National Party in Queensland are holding the federal government to ransom or holding them back from they're really setting the agenda, and it's a handful of MPs from a party that only gets 5% of the vote nationally, but they're in the right seats and they have the government over a barrel. So so they do have a big influence. Yeah, they do have a very big influence. Yeah. Not many voters control those elements, but those elements control the country.
Yeah. But I mean, it is that sort of it's the hydrogen discussion, which I can see is going to be a big thing in Australia. And I am 100% pro hydrogen in comparison with using fossil fuels. There's no question. I don't think it really applies very sensibly to small passenger vehicles, to private cars.
I'm fairly skeptical that we'll see it in large vehicles.
Well, I'm a bit skeptical. Shipping is one place you think, oh, actually, that might really work. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, I went to a green ammonia symposium in Japan beginning of last year. A lot of Australians went, and a lot of Japanese companies that had just recognised hydrogen will be part of the future. Ammonia is probably the most practical way of shipping it around the world, and they've got a plan to start importing ammonia, and they're creating demand. So there's some really interesting things happening there. But I don't think hydrogen will be very, very important. But it doesn't solve every problem. I wouldn't be surprised if I'd be surprised if it ends up being more than 10% of final energy comes through the form of hydrogen. But there's so much ammonia, other hydrogen-based products that are currently using fossils, and steel production.
Yes.
So there are so many opportunities for hydrogen that there's a lot to make with renewable energy before we start running out of uses for it.
Yes, I mean that's because that strikes me, because there is a project. There's a £2 billion renewable energy and hydrogen jobs fund in Queensland that I had not heard of. I just found that yesterday.
Yeah, well,
which is a fairly big commitment after me slagging off Queensland in a very unforgiving way. For my wife,
so we should retract all of that.
Yes.
Can we just mentally
take it all back?
Queensland. Not only do they have a minister responsible for delivering their 50% renewable target by 2030, which for them they're currently at the back of the pack. They're the least renewable. I think they're less than 20%, maybe only 18% renewable at the moment. They want to take that to 50% by 2030, and they have a minister responsible for that. And they also have another minister responsible for hydrogen. Right. So they are in transition mode, and it's so much of the narrative is around the sort of they do exist, but the coal miner in Queensland that's carrying the country. It turns out there are actually not that many of them. 99.5% of Australians don't work in the fossil fuel industry.
That's quite a large majority.
Yeah, 99.5. But and there are already more jobs in renewables than there are in thermal coal.
Wow.
But I think as soon as by Queensland creating these jobs funds, it won't be long before many people in Queensland know somebody who's working in clean tech, whether it's
in some way,
whether it's renewables or hydrogen, or I'm sure you've covered tritium, the charger comes from Queensland.
Yeah, amazing.
How's that?
Yeah. Well, also Red Flow Batteries, which is Simon Hackett's company.
So Queenslanders, we have to take back every
we take it all back.
illusion. We take it all back. Yep.
There was one particular politician that I remember being on the TV
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot. I can't remember her name. I always think she used to work in a fish and chip shop, which I'm sure I've got wrong. But it was.
Oh yes, no, you've got it absolutely right. Yeah,
But I've forgotten it.
yeah,
Pauline, is it
Pauline Hanson?
Pauline
Yeah,
Hanson,
yeah.
yes.
She's gone very quiet.
Yes, I've not heard anything from her.
Thankfully, we don't hear much from her these days. But she's still around.
All right. Anyway, that's so the flip side of that, though, which is something that really confused me because, correct me if I'm wrong, but currently, like in Melbourne in particular, but surely in Victoria, is there a Labor administration, state administration?
Yeah, there is, and they're very good on lots of things to do with the energy transition.
Right. But I mean, they've done.
There's one.
Yes. So
it's one issue. Yeah.
So that does strike me as being confusing. So the tax on electric vehicles, however you.
No, tax. So I believe we become the first place on the planet with a net disincentive for EVs. So and look, the backstory, as I understand it, is that the state treasurers, they have a forum where they get together periodically, and they've been lobbied very hard by the infrastructure sector to start collecting taxes on to start collecting a road user charge. We don't have a road user charge in Australia. There's a tax on there's a fuel excise. And a lot of people mistakenly believe that the tax on fuel is a road tax, but it doesn't go to roads and hasn't.
Yes, that's the same here as well. Yeah,
right. It just goes into consolidated revenue.
Yeah.
There's sort of a panic being put in that we're about to lose all of this tax as a result of EVs, but actually, the EV transition will take. It'll take a while. Before Australia last year was 0.75% of car sales were electric.
Right.
0.75.
0.75.
And the national fleet was 0.1% electric. Right. So we've got a long time before the government starts losing significant money. And I think most people I know in the EV advocacy area fully accept that at some point a road user charge could make sense, or a congestion charge, or some kind of toll. But firstly, we should do it at a point when EVs have got some market share. Yeah. When EVs are the vehicle of choice, where they're overwhelmingly cheaper, we shouldn't disincentivize now. Yeah. So there's been a lot of frustration over this issue. Yeah. But it's a very clumsy road user charge. It applies whether you drive in Victoria or outside. If I drive across into New South Wales, I'd still be paying it.
Right.
It doesn't recognise that there are all sorts of regressive aspects of flat EV charging. So flat road user charge. If you a lot of people drive a long way for work, and generally it's those who live in the inner city drive much shorter distances than say regional folks who are going to be slugged with a lot more of this tax than others. Anyway, but the background is it was brought in now specifically because there are so few drivers. So right now the majority of EVs in Australia are Teslas, driven by people who can afford them.
Who can afford Teslas?
Not much sympathy at all for EV drivers getting slugged with this new tax. Yeah. Fast forward 5 years when hopefully most people who buy a car are going to buy an EV, and the state treasurers feel that there's just no way that they would get that in. There'd be too much.
I see. They couldn't introduce it then. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this coming year, it will collect. It's thought it'll collect less than $3 million.
Right.
Over this decade, it'll collect $1 billion.
Right.
And then by 2040, it'll collect $1 billion a year.
Right.
So in a way, it's sneak it in when it's small and there's no constituency to care about it. Yeah. And gradually, it will become quite a significant source of income for the state.
I mean, I think the danger points from the point of view of everything, not just the government, is that the disincentives mean that if you are a car maker from
Yeah.
from Korea, France, like the Renault Zoe. If you look at you can buy 3 Renault Zoes for the price of the cheapest Tesla. And they're really good electric cars that go a long way. They're amazing. You're going to go, what, are we really going to try and sell cars in Australia? No, let's not bother. We've got enough, the market is big enough in the rest of the world to not worry.
And we've had multiple car makers say quite publicly that Australia is a backwater on EVs, and why would they bother when other countries are helping EV manufacturers into the country? They're helping people buy EVs, but most or a very large percentage of EVs in Australia are hit with a luxury car tax.
Yes,
not because they're a luxury car, but because when you buy the battery up front, it's pushing them into the bracket of some of cars at a much higher luxury level, I guess, if you call it that. It's not a very well thought out tax.
No, because it's also that the aspect of electric cars that when I understood that, I went, oh, this is not a car. When I then went that leap, oh, this is something else. This is a battery with a computer on wheels that you can sit in and move if you want to, but you don't have to. It's still useful when you're not doing that, and that's when the kind of rapid evolvement of vehicle to grid technologies in Europe is really that's the key thing. And I spoke to one of the head engineers at the National Grid in the UK recently, who just did the most simple maths for me because he knows I'm not terribly good at it. But it was if there's 10 million electric vehicles plugged in, so we're talking fleets as well as private vehicles, all those things, that the National Grid can take a kilowatt hour out of each one, 3, 4, 5 miles range from each of them in a peak period. That is 70 gigawatts. So it's 7 kilowatts from each one. 10 million cars, 70 gigawatts. The UK has never in its history used that much electricity in one go. Our peak is about 63. So it can power the entire country for, say, an hour at minimal disturbance to all the people who drive those cars. Very, very slight. And it's a huge resource. Now, that alone saves billions of pounds because you don't have to have all the peak. I mean, this is the picture that's emerging.
I did similar numbers for Australia. Yeah. So we have 19 million light vehicles in Australia,
right? Which is a huge amount considering the population.
Exactly. So let's be. Work with me here. Like, imagine we've got 20 million EVs on the road in 20 years' time. We've sort of turned over the whole fleet. We've got a slightly bigger population. We've got 20 million EVs on the road in 2040.
Yeah.
And imagine that the average one has 50 kilowatt hours of storage in them. That's 1,000 gigawatt hours of storage. Now, we've got our energy market operator put together a really fascinating report last year, and it's every 2 years they do this integrated system plan. It says the cheapest path to low emissions by 2042 requires around about 90 gigawatt hours of storage.
Right.
So we will have 11 times that on wheels.
Right.
In Australia.
Yeah.
Now, so really only a small fraction of it needs to be plugged in.
Yes.
And only happy to give up a small fraction of its battery. And not every day, not cycling every day, but just in those 20 times a year, give up 10% of its battery. And that would be a phenomenal resource. The other thing I think a lot of people haven't got their heads around is, so the vehicle to grid is interesting, but very, very interesting. But long before that, managed charging will be or orchestrated is what I've heard some people in the industry for orchestrated charging, where you'll have a service provider, and some people are already dabbling with this. I know in different markets where you say, keep my car at least 60% charged. But you choose when to charge it and minimise the price for charging. I think we're going to see that, and not only do I end up with cheaper kilometres as an owner, but there are massive advantages for managing the grid of having that huge shifting demand that can be dispatchable demand.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that's that sort of understanding, and it certainly helps when you use apps that show you half hourly the cost of
Yeah.
electricity, which I use here, and it's you wouldn't expect normal people, normal sensible people to be doing that. It's a bit nerdy, but it is fascinating to see that struggle that the grid operators have to maintain the power supply when, for the vast majority of the day, it's not that big. Particularly at the moment here in this country, it's fairly low at the moment. The demand is fairly low. The price is very low. And then
Yep.
at about 4:00 this afternoon, it just goes crazy every day. There's this ridiculous peak of
Well, they have to
price
build the
and
grid.
use. Yeah.
The grid has to be built for that peak. But as you said, most of the time it sits
It's
under
way below that.
peak.
Yeah.
Right. But if you can, everything that's underneath, between the line and the maximum is underutilized grid.
Yeah.
Right? So if you have 20 million vehicles and you get to control when a lot of them charge, you get to fill in under the grid. You avoid the peak and fill in under the grid. So I think we'll find that managed or orchestrated charging will be a huge boon for managing the grid.
Right.
I think most people intuitively focus on vehicle to grid, but I reckon long before vehicle to grid is common, we'll have.
I think you're right. Yes, because it's also a hugely cheaper option. In terms of installation cost and all that stuff, it's a much easier solution.
Lots of EVs already have a SIM card in them hooked to a computer that can control the charger.
Yeah.
So the bits and bytes are already there.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the charger I have, there's a wonderful British company we've done a lot of work with called My Energy, who do a thing called the Zappy charger. That has multiple settings. But I mean, at the moment, that is so my car is plugged in and ready to be charged right now, and it is very sunny now. But my house batteries aren't full, so it won't take the power. Put it into the car until the house batteries are full, then it'll do that. Which I think we might get. I did it. It did very well yesterday. I did about 60 miles, about 80k yesterday, just from. I did nothing. I did nothing. I was out in the garden planting some beetroot. That's when it was doing it. It is great. That is possible, but that will also their latest software links in with the half-hourly wholesale price.
Oh,
so
really?
it does exactly what you say. It starts charging out of the blue. It'll suddenly start charging because it's only 4p a kilowatt hour or whatever the reason, whatever you set it at.
Yeah. Well, I think at the moment, I know lots of people who sit in they're the brains who they're watching their energy app. They're watching their solar panels. They're watching their car, and they sit in the middle. And if they're lucky, they'll save $1 a day. On that. But I think we'll get to the point where we can automate it.
Yes, exactly. It's got to be automated.
Without thinking, several 100,000 or millions of people will be saving $5 a day. And then that starts becoming really valuable, both to them and managing the grid, as I said.
Yeah. But then let's go. Can we go? Because the other one I'd not heard of before. So, and this is I read about you is the NEM data tool. I have no idea what that is. So that's something. Is that something you devised?
Yeah. Well,
OpenNEM.
OpenNEM. NEM is National Electricity Market, so it's the biggest electricity market in Australia, and it's probably 80% of the electricity in Australia comes through the National Electricity Market. So,
right. So it's, in a sense, it's linked to what we've been talking about. It is how you access that data, which is very important.
My colleague Dylan McConnell at Melbourne University started more than a decade ago, just grabbing all the data he could from the National Electricity Market, putting them into a database for researchers to use. And a lot of what we were finding back then is that a lot of journalists didn't have access to much data, so they would take whatever the last lobbyist or industry person told them. Lots of consumer advocates or environment groups would turn up to consultations and they didn't have good data. And we really wanted to make that data. And if you're a business, you could pay $50,000 a year for a fancy subscription to some market data service. But ultimately, the underlying data is free. Just the tools to access it and make it easy to access weren't. So we put together a website where you can opennem.org.au. We'll put it in the show notes. Where people can go in and have a look at what's happening in the electricity market down to the 5-minute granularity, zooming all the way out to now we go back to I got a little alert on my
Yes,
computer.
me too. But it seems to be. I don't know. I got the same.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's good. It's all right now. It's reconnected. Don't worry
So-
about it because it's recording.
Yep.
It's fine.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so OpenNEM allows you to look at 5-minute granularity all the way out to back to 1998.
Right.
And then look by technology, look at market prices,
Right.
temperature on the day, and then you can also zoom into individual power stations, and you can see what's happening at a particular coal power station. There was one that blew up 2 weeks ago in Queensland.
Yes.
It was spectacular. It threw a 300.
Actually, did blow up like an explosion.
It actually blew up.
Right.
It actually explosion.
Wow.
It flung a 300 kilogram piece of its shaft into the and embedded it in the ceiling.
Oh my God!
It absolutely destroyed this 450 megawatt generator.
Wow.
Anyway, so we can see its last moments. Its last few minutes, whatever.
Right.
On OpenNEM, and it's got a map of every medium and large scale renewable energy generator in both the NEM and West Australia's network, which is called the Swiss. So we've done a lot of work on that to make it so you can view Australian data, but also we're working on the internal so we can start pulling in other countries' data. So hopefully we'll have the UK and other markets up soon. Yeah.
But then can you see on that, because that was an anecdotal story I heard. So I've got nothing to back it up, but that because of the rise of rooftop solar, particularly the way, as we discussed earlier, the way it links in with energy use from things like air conditioning, and not just on private houses. Like I remember going to a supermarket, a big shopping mall in northern New South Wales that was advertising its solar roof car park, and it does lots of, it was doing a big shtick about all that. But the proliferation of rooftop solar means that there has been a drop in demand from things like coal burning power plants. I mean, has that affected? Because it's the economic.
Yes.
This is what I'm confused. Is it the fact that the economics are challenged? So the economics of the coal industry have been very severely challenged by the
absolutely. So we've had 13 coal power stations closed in Australia last decade.
Wow, I didn't know that. Right, okay, that's quite a lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
I guess there are a couple that were well known that people, but a lot of them just quietly closed. 13 of them, we had a surplus of generation, and solar has played a significant part in creating that surplus. But one thing it does is solar crashes the price during the middle of the day.
Yeah.
So used to be the middle of the day was the peak
cost.
Peak, and now. I guess many of your listeners will know about the duck curve. As more and more solar comes on, the peak gets flattened, and eventually, starts high, and then it comes lower and lower and lower until it becomes a dip.
Right.
And then you have the sun goes down, and you have a great big ramp in the evening as everyone's turning everything on, and the sun's going down about the same time. So you get the stick neck of the duck. But it's really making life hard for those poor coal generators.
Right. And so why, I guess, is that why there's such huge enthusiasm to export it? Because if your business is digging up coal and no one wants it in your home country, or less people want it, then you need to ship it somewhere.
Yeah, well, one of the issues we've got that Australia is facing with coal is that our biggest customers for thermal coal is Japan, China, and South Korea, and I think Taiwan is number 4. Well, those first 3 have got net zero targets, and the 4th one's about to put one in. So, and if a country saying they're going to be net zero by 2050 is basically saying they're going to stop burning coal, in the next 15 years or so, right? So I think there are a lot of people in denial in Australia thinking that that everyone want to. Because only about 20% of the coal mined in Australia stays in Australia, 80% goes overseas.
Right, wow.
And people imagine that it's going to go on forever. But not only will the local demand dry up as solar and wind push out the coal, but our customers have already told the world they're going to stop buying.
They're going to stop buying.
We haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, because that is the fascinating mindset of which we've all grown up with, the mindset of of extracting fuel from the planet, in whatever form, oil, gas, coal, it is by definition sort of short term. Oh, if I dig this up now, I can sell it now, and then I get money. Well, I dig that bit up and say, it's not. It just is by definition. It's like that. That's the future. It's right there. It's the balance sheet of next month is the future.
A perverse thing that's happening in Australia right now is we have a record number of coal mines going through the application process now for getting approvals
to open new ones.
To open new ones, and there's a great Australian economist, Richard Dennis, who described it. He said if you had an ice cream van and the freezer broke down, you would be giving away the stuff, right? You would, if you knew that your product is worthless, if you knew your product is worthless in an hour, you would be doing
get rid of it as soon as you could.
You'd discount it. You would find new customers. You would do everything you could but they know that the clock is running out, and so everyone who's been sitting on proposals for a long time is trying to rush them through.
Wow.
But the timelines mean that most of them will fail to get their project up.
Yeah.
God,
that is
so. The market dries up.
Yeah, I mean that is one of the things I must admit I learned quite a few years ago when because it's that weird thing of someone with my background attending energy conferences, which I would never have dreamt of doing 20 years ago. Like, are you kidding? Why would I go there? But and conferences run by minerals extraction companies and data companies that do that. I mean, amazing, and you meet the most amazing people. But what has been clear about all those discussions is if you like, the energy transition, if you like, and if that's what we're going through, which I think it's pretty clear we are, is also it causes huge disturbance. It messes things up. We had this quite simple system. Why did we have to mess it up where we drill for oil and we put it in cars and we burn it, and then we dig up coal and we burn it in power station, we get electricity? That worked. No matter what your opinion about it, as a system, it worked. And it's now being bashed around as we transition to something else. And it is going to be distressing. It's going to cause problems.
Well, let's say by tonnage, half the coal we export is metallurgical coal. So not for making power, but for making steel.
Right.
And that's half by tonnage, but it's actually 3/4 by value. So it's that is significant.
So that's where the money is. Effectively, it's for that rather than
is in the metallurgical coal is much higher quality.
Right.
But it's not. It's too valuable to burn for power. You use it for making steel. So as the world starts moving away from using metallurgical coal, it's thought that the most likely candidate is hydrogen. I wouldn't be surprised if we invent other processes, but let's say it's hydrogen for now. Australia sends massive quantities of iron ore off to Asia to get turned into steel, and we send massive amounts of metallurgical coal.
Right.
So, and hydrogen's pretty expensive to transport. So, really, it's going to make a lot more sense for us to take the energy we've got here in abundant clean energy and abundant iron ore and turn it into steel in Australia. So this would bring us, I guess, almost full circle. It's such an opportunity for Australia.
Yes, absolutely. Now I can see. I mean, because I know there is a plant now that's now producing. I think it's stainless steel specifically in Sweden, which is only using hydrogen and renewable electricity. So, I think it's a proof of concept, but it isn't a laboratory; it's a big plant.
I think there are five sort of demonstration scale projects in Europe, and the Swedes were the first to have something that's a little bit bigger than demonstration. But I visited a massive ThyssenKrupp, the big German industrial. I visited their smelter in Duisburg in the Rhine end of 2019, and they were. It's been there. For many decades. Thousands of people work there with these great big blast furnaces, but they were absolutely aware that they've committed 30% reduction by 2030 and net zero for their business. They're absolutely aware that everything on that site has to be replaced with green steel production over the next 30 years. They're committed to it.
Amazing. Wow. Simon, you please come on again. So I've got loads of other questions. I can't even remember them all now. But I mean, I follow you on Twitter, but you write quite often. You write articles for The Guardian, So I guess the Guardian of Australia, but
okay.
some really interesting articles I've come across that you've done.
Oh, great.
That cover a lot of the ground we've discussed today. But
that they read outside our borders. Great.
Yes.
And very much looking forward to seeing Fully Charged down here in Australia next year.
We are so. What I'm amazed at is we've actually sold some tickets already. I don't think very many.
Oh, really?
We've had ticket sales, which is incredible because we barely announced it.
I didn't even know they were for sale. That's great.
Yeah, so it's very exciting. No, we're really excited about it. And I think it will be. I was the cynical naysayer for our British shows when it was first proposed that we did a live show. I said, who's going to come to that? It's stupid, And the location we had was a motor racing circuit which is in the middle of nowhere, no public transport. It was really difficult to get to. All those problems. It was sold out. It was packed the first year. We doubled the size the second year. We then did it in America, where again I said, this isn't going to work. We don't understand the American market. It's not going to work, and it was sold out, and it was amazing. So I'm now hoping that when we're in Australia, I think I need to say it'll never work. No one in Australia will come, because then it'll be a success.
Definitely sell out.
But it's in Sydney in October next year, 2022. No, we're really looking forward to it. And I want you to come and do a presentation or a talk or something.
I'd love to come.
Yeah, great. No, brilliant. Thank you so much, Simon. Thanks for your time.
Great. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It was really wonderful to catch up with Simon. I definitely want to get him on the show more. I definitely want him to be at Fully Charged Live in Australia in October next year. Really looking forward to that. Can't quite believe it'll ever happen, but I'm sure it will. I kind of know it will, really. It's going to be brilliant. So that's all. Please do subscribe to this podcast on whatever podcast download app you use. And if you're watching it on YouTube, please subscribe to the Fully Charged Plus YouTube channel. And if you want to have a look at the Patreon link that's beneath this video, you'll be very welcome. With lots more wonderful Fully Charged podcasts coming up, and the Fully Charged show on YouTube as well has been literally delivering large dollops of data about clean energy, electric vehicles, and the energy transition twice a week. So don't miss that. There's some great shows coming up and lots more to come this autumn, and there's Fully Charged Live coming soon in September. Have a look at that on the webpage fullycharged.show. But that's it. As always, if you have been, thank you for listening.